NASA's Mars 2020 mission will blaze a trail for humans. NASA latest update: when a female astronaut first sets foot on the moon in only 5 years, 2024, the historic moment will represent a step towards another NASA first, eventually putting humans on Mars. NASA's latest robotic mission to the red planet, Mars 2020, aims to help future astronauts brave that inhospitable landscape. While the science goal of the Mars 220 rover is to look for signs of ancient life, it will be the first spacecraft to collect samples of the Martian surface, catching them in tubes that could be returned to Earth in a future mission. The vehicle also includes technology that paves the way for human exploration of Mars. The atmosphere on Mars is mostly carbon dioxide and extremely thin, about 100 times less dense than what we have on Earth, with no breathable oxygen. There's no water on the surface to drink either. The landscape is freezing, with no protection from the sun's radiation or from passing dust storms. The keys to survival will be technology, research, and testing. Mars 220 will help on all those fronts. When it launches in July of 2020, the spacecraft will carry the latest scientific and engineering tools, which are coming together as the rover is built at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Concerning the touchdown, every landing on Mars offers a learning opportunity, and with Mars 220, that includes how the spacecraft's heat shield and parachute perform in the planet's atmosphere, and how well its radar can sense the approaching surface. Sensors in the spacecraft's aeroshell, the capsule that encloses the rover, will study how it heats up and performs during atmospheric entry. These Mars entry, descent, and landing instrumentation 2 MED-LI 2 sensors could help engineers improve their landing designs for big payloads like astronaut equipment and habitats. Landing a rover like this one also gives NASA more experience putting a heavy spacecraft on the surface of Mars. The challenge of landing in the thin Martian atmosphere scales with mass. The first crewed spacecraft will be titanic by comparison, carrying with it life support systems, supplies, and shielding. Finally, Mars 220 has a guidance system that will take a step towards safer landings. It's called Terrain Relative Navigation. This new system figures out where the spacecraft is headed by taking camera images during descent and matching landmarks in them to a preloaded map. If the spacecraft drifts towards dangerous terrain, it will divert to a safer landing target. Terrain Relative Navigation allowed the 220 team to select a landing site, Jezero Crater, that was considered too risky for previous missions. This kind of autonomous guidance could prove essential to landing humans safely. It would also be useful for landing equipment in multiple drops ahead of a human crew. Now, oxygen. Living on Mars will require a steady supply of oxygen, which would be costly to transport from Earth in the necessary volumes. A cube-shaped device called the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, or MOXIE for short, is exploring a space-saving alternative that converts carbon dioxide, which constitutes about 96% of the Martian atmosphere, into oxygen. Of course, it needs energy to do this, totally, all the time. Now, although MOXIE is a small-scale demonstration, the hope is that this technology could evolve into bigger and more efficient oxygen generators in the future. Those would allow astronauts to create their own breathable air and would provide oxygen to burn rocket fuel needed to return humans to the Earth. More importantly, MOXIE's descendants would save precious space on the first crewed vehicle to Mars. Not only would that leave more room for supplies, it could also reduce the cost and difficulty of getting from Earth to Mars. Now, what about water? Satellites orbiting the red planet Mars regularly peek underground using radar, but Mars 220 is carrying a ground-penetrating radar called Radar Imager for Mars Subsurface Experiment RIMFAX for short. That will be the first operated at the Martian surface. Mars 220 scientists will use its high-resolution images to look at buried geology like ancient lake beds. But such a radar could one day be used to find stores of underground ice that astronauts could access to provide drinking water. Jezero crater is unlikely to have any such catches, but many exist elsewhere on Mars. Spacesuits? Dust and radiation are part of every Martian weather forecast. Dust blows everywhere, sticking to spacecraft and covering solar panels. And because the planet does not have a magnetic field, as Earth does, the sun's radiation bathes the Martian surface. The orbits of Earth and Mars align best for interplanetary travel every 2 years, meaning the first astronaut on the red planet are likely to endure long exposures to radiation. To help engineers design spacesuits to shield astronauts from the elements, NASA is sending 5 samples of spacesuit material along with one of Mars 220's science instruments called Scanning Habitat Environments with Raman and Luminescent for Organics and Chemicals, SHERLOC for short. A piece of an astronaut's helmet and 4 kinds of fabric are mounted on the calibrated target for this instrument. Scientists will use SHERLOC as well as a camera that photographs visible light to study how the materials degrade in ultraviolet radiation. It will mark the first time spacesuit material has been sent to Mars for testing and will provide a vital comparison for ongoing testing at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Now, what about shelter? Humans exploring the red planet will need more than good spacesuits. They'll need a place to live. Mars 220 will collect science that may help engineers design better shelters for future astronauts. Like NASA's Curiosity rover and InSight lander, 220 has weather instruments to study how dust and radiation behave in all seasons. This suite of sensors, called the Mars Environmental Dynamic Analyzer, MEDA for short, is the next step in the kind of weather science Curiosity collects. This image that you're looking at by NASA of the Mars surface, very strange blue. We think it could be water, for example, but it's not. It's actually a landslide, Cerberus fossae. And for the life of me, I have no idea why it's a blue color, but you can see that there are various color schemes on the surface of Mars. And this is absolutely fascinating. It's a huge landslide from what we can see. Which means what? Earthquakes? Now, God forbid, if we have no knowledge of the geology of Mars and where it could have earthquakes happening, where they have fractures, where they have volcanic activity, where they have sedimentary deposits that are very soft for construction of a human colony or landing sites. Now, this information was from NASA concerning the latest news on the Mars mission. And I, for one, have a big question. Why don't they first set up a mission and a colony on the moon, test all these things on the moon, which is closer to us, and will, of course, have basically the same problems: no water, no air, very extreme temperatures, and radiation exposure as well, but at least that is closer to us, and you can first test everything there instead of waiting to go to Mars, which will take months on end to get to, and it is so far from Earth. Why don't they do this on the moon first? That's my question. Now, from the various past videos that we've come with information of NASA and astronomers, they have told us that the rock material, the samples that have been analyzed by the various rovers there, have shown that the surface of Mars was contaminated with radiation as if from a type of a nuclear or an atomic blast. Which means that what happened? Was that from an impact from some kind of a celestial body, or was this by an intentional, some kind of a battle between various intelligent beings that had the knowledge of use of nuclear power and had caused the radiation contamination? Was it from nuclear powered plants? Was it from an explosive device? Why is the soil of Mars contaminated with nuclear radiation? So if that's the case, why would you put humans colonizing there? Very important questions to answer first. And again, the easiest thing to do is to set all this up first on the moon. And if it works on the moon, you can use it to go extend your space exploration to other planets of the solar system, like Mars. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.